Hello, chess fans. Welcome to the scrapyard. It's going down. I'm playing the next bot in my series of bot challenges, working my way through the advanced bots of chess.com. Starting with the three 1500 bots, I knocked them down one at a time. I beat Antonio, I beat Wendy, and I beat Pierre like drums. And now I'm off against Pablo here, the 1600 rated bot, as we take it to the next level. According to the chess.com fluff, Pablo is his club champion, and he's cocky, and he's a gambit player. So that's something for you to look forward to as it goes down in the scrapyard. So here we go. D4, second best by test. It's D4, Patzers, D4. Pablo playing knight to F6. I make my standard second move. I'm just going to be white against all these bots until finally one of them beats me. Well, this doesn't look like a gambit. Pablo is playing D6. I, as black, played D6 against everything, so it's interesting to see one of my weapons being used against me. As black, I'm usually playing D6 first, followed by knight to F6. I play the same 5 moves. Okay, this is just ridiculous. Now, already here, with move 3, queen to D7, things have gotten ridiculous. Obviously, it's a subpar move because it blocks in his own light squared bishop. Where is he going with this thing? The queens can be a bit tricky in the opening, especially against the e-pawn, which is undefended on e4 for you e4 pawn players, but that's not the case with the d-pawn. The d-pawn covered by the queen, and in this instance, also by another pawn. I really don't see the problems here. My next move is bishop e2. That is the signature move of my signature opening, which doesn't have a name. If you want to suggest a name for this opening, drop it down in the doobly-doo below. And now Pablo is lashing out with h7, h5. Trying to gain space on the queen side. We used to laugh at these moves as chess players back in the day, before computers. But AlphaZero and other computers have demonstrated that winging the flank pawns, either the A pawn or the H pawn, down the board creates certain strategical and tactical difficulties for the opponent. And now we see in modern chess either A5 or H5 being played much more frequently. However, in this particular setup, the move appears to be completely random, and so I'm gonna, on autopilot, make my 5th and last move for my opening system, which is to castle my king to safety. So I have my share of the center, I've developed my king side, and I have castled my king to safety. That is all the purpose of this opening. Black playing c5 now. If I capture, I will be giving up my central pawn's strong point, and he will recapture. It's a side pawn for a center pawn. These queens will be in opposition. So, well, first thing I want to just look at is the captures. Often we start with checks, captures when we do our analysis. So, takes, and then I'll trade the queens off. That helps him develop his light squared bishop. And I don't see me having any particular advantage in that situation. Notice by playing a5, he has created a weakness on this b4 square, which he exacerbated by playing c5. Now it's a gaping weakness, a great big toothless grin in his position. And this light squared bishop is salivating to settle on that square. He will move the knight to c6, presumably at some point. So this is not a fatal threat, but it is tempting. What I might want to do here is play a4 myself and cement that weakness in stone. The next problem for me after my first 5 moves is to develop my queen side. My typical plan is c2, c4, knight to c3, b3, bishop to b2, foreshadowing onto the long dark square diagonal, and then rook to c1 to complete my development, my mindless development, I might add, because black can pretty much set up anything they want, and they can, and they do, but they don't get any sort of advantage out of the opening. Black doesn't. White tends to come out of this with a sliver of advantage, and that's really all I want. I'm not getting blown off the board, and I have a good opportunity to have a very slight advantage coming out of the opening. But I may deviate now from my standard plan to put a pawn here in consideration. The knight is really the one, though. The bishop was salivating, but the knight, the pony, is the one that wants to outpost here. Knight's slow-moving pieces, they have to get up and into the enemy position. They do that with a number of hops, and they like to settle on an outpost, and then even better if the outpost is defended by a pawn. Then the knight becomes dangerous. For that reason, I might just play c4. It has the same salutary benefit of controlling this b4 square. In addition, I can now develop my knight out to c3 without blocking my c-pawn, and then into b4, and that's probably what I will do. I might want to hold my a-pawn back so I don't create a b4 weakness myself, because you know the Dark Knight here, the Batman Knight, Queenside Batman Knight, is trying to get to b4. So we're going to continue with my standard set of developments. d5 is a possibility also for me. I found in my opening system that if I get d5 in, I'm better, flat better. Not just a little bit better, but flat better. Not a sliver, but actually that's when white is better. However, black has decided to make the shocking pawn advance from a5 to a4. I talked about these charging flank pawns, and black is going to demonstrate that principle or concept right here in this game here, going down in the scrapyard on the 64 squares. I can ignore it, just ignore it, because I'm a classical chess player anyway. I like classical pawn centers, hoary old Queen's Gambit style setups like we have here. The advantage moving here vacated the square behind it. The rook could come into that square, very unlikely. Now the main disruption of this pawn would be preventing me from playing b3 easily, because captures, and if I recapture with the a pawn, then I'm dropping the rook. Because I can't play b3, then my standard ideas for developing my bishop either to b2 or a3 is thwarted, and my bishop is further hammed in by the fact that I like to play e3 on my third move to bolster the center and open up the diagonal for the light squared bishop. I could play a3. That would control the b4 square, preventing black from outposting his knight. However, you see the queen and the rook are coordinated on this pawn to protect it, so even if I put my knight onto c3, I'm not threatening to take the pawn, but I would be. And difficult decision. I could also put the bishop on d2. It's rare in my system that I have to put the bishop on d2. It's typically not good, unless it is. There are some off circumstances in the opening where bishop d2 is the move, rather than trying to get the bishop to b2. But it's rare, like I said. I could challenge the pawn immediately with b3, like I talked about that already. But the challenge would be I could recapture with the queen, which would put it against this backwards b2 pawn, and on this diagonal, even the pawn's in my way. If I played b3, b3 and he tried to advance the pawn, then it's a free pawn to capture. If I play b3, captures, am I better off? If I remove my queen from the back rank, a necessary step for eventually connecting my rooks. If I play b3, I have weakened the a3 square, but from a pawn perspective, but not from the piece perspective. This thing is backwards, right? So if I get my queen here after pawn exchanges, he will play here, no doubt. I can capture. He's going to have trouble playing that pawn to that square because it's backed up by the light squared bishop. Let's play b3. We're going to make the first real attempt in this opening thus far for white to refute black's play. He's coming towards the b4 square. We talked about that. He wants to outpost the knight there. Very understandable. I have the same impulse about wanting to post my knight on b5. So tit for tat is the name of the game right now. I can simply capture the pawn though because he has blocked the rook. If I capture the pawn and the knight comes to b4, now I'm dealing with a knight that's outposted in my position. It's on my side of the board, it's in my house. And he's reopened the attack on my pawn that would be on a4, which I could cover with knight to c3. And I'm trying to buy time to play a2, a3 and kick his knight. I'm getting into complications before I'm developed. It's against my rules. If I play a3 and take away the b4 square from the knight, then black might try something like this to open up the c5 square for the knight instead. However, I'll recapture with my e-pawn, and that will help me develop my dark square bishop to its alternative diagonal, the c1 to h6 diagonal. I'm having lemonade in my giant beer stein. So, difficult crossroads for me. One of the ideas about my opening system, my first 5 moves, is rapid development. That's about as quick as you can get control of the center, your kingside pieces developing castle. That's pretty much as fast as you can do it. The idea is I continue developing at a pace. I therefore am faster than black, getting all my pieces into the game, even if they are not on the most dynamic squares, and then I work from there. Okay, so we're going to go more to the concrete problem now, which is do I capture this pawn? Captures knight to b4, that's his compensation. Knight to c3. Now I'm defending the pawn on the a4 square. Can't play this. Alright. We're going to take the material because we're greedy, and that's just what we're going to do here, folks. Not the benefit. He wants to put the light square bishop on b7. The pawn is still woefully backwards. So I can attack it. There'll be some risk involved with that because the rook will try to shoo my queen away and make use of the open b file. If the black drops the knight into the hole I have now on b4, I just simply plan to kick it away with a3. the knight really not going anywhere dangerous from b4 and will have to retreat either back to whence it came on a6 or possibly to c6. Then I can push d5 with tempo. So I really kind of want him to try and sink his knight into the b4 square so that I can chase it around and gain some tempo. Let's develop the knight. It is also defending now the b pawn, which here on the a file is doubled, which is a weakness for me, theoretically. And it can't be protected by another pawn, so I've got to start looking after it with pieces. My queen is too valuable a piece, too much of a prima donna to want to be guarding pawns. Pablo pays bishop e7 as advertised. I don't mind the exchange of the knights. It'll bring my light squared bishop to a very strong diagonal. This knight is a key defender on my king side. Another element of my 5-move opening is to put the knight on its most active square, f3, and then generally keep it there for quite a bit of time, defending my king. I don't mind attacking the opponent with the rest of my pieces. I like to leave the knight, though, around my king. The knight and king coordinate very well defensively. Alright, if I move queen to b3, I've got her off the back rank. I'm defacking this pawn so that it's with a tempo. Black is likely to relocate the queen to c7. A slightly better square maybe for the queen, maybe. But notice how if he had played queen to c7 earlier with his bishop still on the c8 square, then that light square bishop would have had options or choices. But now making the queen move away offers back no real benefit to this light squared bishop because he's already committed it. If I do come off this light diagonal, then I am off the d1 to h5 diagonal with my queen, where there could be some pressure. There could be some pressure. Remember, the fluff on Pablo is that he's an attacker and a gambit style player. He did manage to play a gambit. We'll give him credit for that. Oh, by the way, I'm wearing my rockabilly shirt. It's Sunday. It's a beautiful day out. Very hot, though, here along the banks of the mighty Mississippi River. I'm not quite ready to deploy my bishop because this pawn exchange, I want to keep the option open of putting the bishop down the c1 to h6 diagonal. Therefore, I think I'm going to go queen next, and she will come to b3. We are going to attack this pawn. Now he's come in with the knight. Now I have to be careful. The knight, we always look at the knight hops, right? Okay, let's look at the whole geometric consequence of black's last move, because sometimes that helped. The knight came off of a6. The a6 square is now vacant. It's vacant for the bishop if it wants to come out. It's also vacant for the rook, which now has a clear line of sight to my pawn on a4 in conjunction with the queen. In addition, we have to look at the geometry of where can the knight go. I think that's an important aspect of playing against knights, is to understand their jumps, sometimes going 2 and even 3 jumps deep into potential destinations for the knight. So here's the knight. It's coming to c7, not particularly a threat, not particularly a threat. I have those squares covered, not particularly a threat. So we're going to bump it just like I planned earlier. If it comes back to c6, which would be its most active square, it will hinder the light squared bishop and give me an opportunity to consider capturing this pawn on b6. A lightning fast raid. Since the knight is covering this pawn, the two black pieces of higher value who want to gobble up the a4 pawn would have to do so at a material loss should my queen go away. Bump it. Here we go. Kick it. Now what's your idea, Pablo? Back to a6. It was all just a bluff, folks. It was all just a bluff. Here we go. That's another pawn. You've gambited 2 pawns, Pablo. I'll be 2 pawns up, virtually winning at that point. I'm already, I think, strategically better. Might want to play d5 at some point quickly, then bring my bishop to the now open long square diagonal. d5 also has the benefit of kind of suppressing Pablo's counterplay and blocking in this light squared bishop. But the first thing we want to look at is the material. Bobby Fischer said it was take the material. Okay, so I take the pawn. The bishop takes the knight. My bishop recaptures. Now Bozo, the rook, comes to the b file and attacks my queen, but this knight is now undefended, so I can capture it. So I think I can get in and out as necessary without trapping my queen. And chess fans, if I do trap my queen on this and I lose the game, then you'll get to see me play black against Pablo, and you'll get to see me rant and rave and ramble about my 1d6 against everything play. Interesting. The knight has come to the e4 square. It's challenging my knight on c3, which is undefended. This does happen momentarily in my setup. This setup here, which is very common coming out of my opening after I play c2, c4, when I put the knight on c3 and then I go to fianchetto my bishop by moving the b pawn, the knight sometimes, for just a snap moment in time, one move, is undefended. If he has fianchettoed a bishop to the long dark square diagonal, like a King's Indian or Perch type player, then there can be tactics here. So it's something I'm usually cognizant of, but didn't speak to in this particular position. The problem for me is if the knight moves away, then we've lost the defender of the pawn, and black will take it. It's not the end of the world at all. I have this a pawn still. It's outside and it's passed. Plus, I think I still have a positional superiority. One idea is recapture the knight. That way I get it out. The black knight is also on the central square. Very strong for knights. They want to be, pieces in general want to be on these central squares where they have the most scope. Notice the knight overviews quite a few squares from the center. That's why knights and pieces in general like to be in the center, with the exception of rooks, which on an open board control the same number of squares regardless of where you put them in the corner or the middle. Doesn't matter. If I take the bishop, and then I'm probably going to go queen here, pinning his dark against his king. But then he'll bring the bishop back. That way he'll be threatening, and then he'll recapture this pawn with his bishop, which is preferable for him, I would say. I can take, he can take, and then we can do what targets sometimes like to do, is simply push the pawn. Just push the pawn. Now I'm guarding my queen for what it's worth. He'll come rook here. I could still take that knight. I'm playing a little bit with fire. A little bit with fire, ladies and gentlemen. There's also kind of a tactic. I don't think it's ever really going to be feasible. You know, if I could get my rook to check, the queen would have to block. And I could take, of course, The knight is ruining that whole idea, making it unworkable. I could move my bishop. I would move it to the b2 square, covering my knight. He takes. He has lost a little bit of time racing his knight across the board. I recapture. He can't take the pawn with the queen because the bishop is loose, but he might try to create a threat this way. Then this idea might work because the bishop. I don't know. It gets complicated. It gets complicated, ladies and gentlemen. It gets complicated. I have a kind of a pseudo threat here again. Once again, the knight though ruins the party. I would have had a fork, but the knight covers the square. Similar concept to go here. I'm moving the target away. What if I put it right into the b square? Now my queen could be very easily trapped. The idea is I'm going to try and escape my queen this way. That leaves his dark squared bishop knight behind on e4. Knight here. I'm not sure what the follow-up is. That's the risky move. I might play it for the peanut gallery because I think I might be able to escape this way. If I were to move here, and let's say the passageways are clogged, and he were to move his knight in, then I'd have to go back. And that could be the basis of a trap. The rook would come. Now my queen is trapped. I could very easily get my queen trapped in here. Very easily it could happen, ladies and gentlemen. Another idea. Takes, defend the pawn. Knight comes in though. Eh. Wow. What am I going to do? Again, the paralysis of analysis. To quote Martin Luther King. It's a toughie, folks. It's a toughie. Takes. Now I play d5 with the idea of cutting this bishop off from doing anything about my activity on the queen side. Can't play here. With the bishop cut off, then maybe I could do something like this. I'm gonna just take the knight because despite all my headache migraine calculations here, I'm gonna fall back on my intuition, which is get this knight out of the center. And now, of course, I haven't fully considered my follow-ups. I thought this might be good. He might challenge this way, creating an opportunity to develop his dark square bishop and exchange. Maybe bring my rook over. This another idea. This an idea. This an idea. Well, that would bring the knight to a good square. Getting my queen out of dodge. Another idea. And looking at the board now with the actual pieces on their squares, I don't know if that was best. I do have a tactic that often comes out of my opening. I use it frequently in positions, and I call it the pinwheel, which is I'll move my knight here, or my knight could go to here at some point. The bishop, say, retreats back, and then I pinwheel my bishop to the f3 square. Okay, he trades it off, and my knight comes back. The pinwheel is complete, and I've removed black's most dangerous minor piece, which is what I might do. I just might do it. Go for the pinwheel tactic, because there's a juicy rook at the end of the rainbow if I can pinwheel my bishop to f3. So I'm going to do the pinwheel. For a moment, this square was open. Look, the square was open, but I don't think he'd get to it. He wants this, but we're not going to let him have it. Pinwheel, pinwheel. Okay. He could grab the pawn. It was a bit dangerous to do so. Rook b1, very interesting in this situation because the check, it's a similar tactical motif that I discussed earlier. So the idea is rook b1 followed by queen b8 check. The rook takes queen, rook takes rook, check. Only way to save the king's life is to interpose the queen. Rook takes queen, check, king takes queen. And at the end of all that, we've exchanged queens and rooks. Kind of like this idea now, b5, because there is an attack here. Remember, the knight uncovered. The other thing, as I advised, is look about where can these knights go. Here, here, here. Okay, the knight is dominated by a pawn 2 squares away. So b5 and d5 not really feasible for this knight, but it can come to e6. If it did, I'm just kind of itching to play d5, gaining space, cramping this bishop, cramping this pawn chain, and stopping the knight from coming to e6, keeping that knight corralled. Suppose I play rook b1 and he takes with the queen, then this tactic doesn't really work. The king can escape that way. So rook b1 is not on the cards right now, but this move is. Here it comes, alpha 0. Slow. It's slow. My plan is if he advances one more square to a4, I'm gonna build the bathtub. If you watch enough of my YouTube videos, you'll know all about the bathtub, which is the pawn formation. e3, f2, g2, and h3 forming a bathtub. And that's a very strong defensive formation for pawns. The reason is because the interior pawns can advance, and every pawn can defend itself. It's the horns of the buffalo. So if he plays h4 like alpha 0, like some sort of supercomputer genius, well then we're going to deal with you by playing h3, and there's no real sacrifice. He doesn't have the material to really attack. He doesn't have the time or material for an attack. In this position, my biggest problem is my dark squared bishop and the fact that I've not involved my rooks in the game. By default, Pablo is involving his rooks by advancing those flank pawns. Which means, despite my material advantage of 2-pawn equivalency here, I'm not getting the most out of all my pieces. And the worst piece of all on the board, other than his dark squared bishop, is my dark squared bishop, which is almost equally miserable, but I can play to d2 to cover this square. This is an advanced pawn. That's how I'm going to win the game in most of the parallel universes where this game pans out. An advantage of playing d5 also is it puts my pawns on light squares away from his dark squared bishop. It would open up this diagonal though, and it's very possible that he's going to try and fianchetto his dark squared bishop to the g7 square castle, connecting his rooks, perhaps bringing them over here, and taking advantage of the fact that all his missing pawns have opened up files for him. We're going to play development chess. This has to develop. Okay, so two choices. Defend my pawn. The queens don't like to defend pawns. They're too high value to be stuck with such a mundane task. Or bring it to b2, where I have sort of a tactical vulnerability. If ever black can play rook to b8 and line up the queen and bishop. On the other hand, then when I do play d5, I've got this. If I play bishop b2 now, then if he tries to fianchetto, this hurts him a lot. Probably he'd have to play this, weakening his king side. It's a tough decision. I think I've said that about every move. Trying to be precise. Reuben Fine wrote in one of his books that I was studying, when he went to Europe, his entire goal was just to play accurately. And I try to do that. My game, last game where I played against the bot, the 1500 bot, I actually did well. I played at a 94% accuracy with no inaccuracies, mistakes, or blunders. But that was mainly because my opponent was making poor moves, where my moves are more obvious, my replies, so I can play more accurately. Anyway, I digress. What we're doing now is agonizing over where to put the dark squared bishop. Realistically speaking, moving the a pawn from a5 down to a8, and it's a girl queening the pawn, is not going to happen until much later. So defending the pawn long term is in my best interest. While this is maybe the most best square for the dark squared bishop, you know, there could be tactical issues for me. One of the problems, Pablo has several problems actually. He's riddled with problems. But he didn't get his king castled, and he's made no effort to get his king castled. His dark squared bishop still hemmed in by both of the exit door pawns. And that's problematic for him. If his queen moves away, I have a check. Yeah. Can I kind of sacrifice on that motif? Not particularly. Is there any way I can get the queen to move? No. But she can't move away easily and take her eyes off the c6 square in this brutal check. Patzer's is going to be bishop d2. I'm going to play a little passively. Didn't particularly expect this, but we did talk earlier in the game about black pushing the e-pawn and making the trapdoor on e7 for the bishop and castling. And I agree. I think this is not bad for black. I believe he would have done better with a fianchetto, though. The problem he's going to have is, one, I can play my d4, d5 plan. Now he's got pawns on dark squares, which inhibits his own dark squared bishop, right? And my dark square bishop has potential targets in an endgame. That's problem number one. Problem number two is king's in the center. So if I take, he recaptures. Now the center is opening up. There's an open D file with his king still in the center and no possibility of a castle. Then I bring my F rook into the game. I need to get my rooks into the game. Discussed earlier. It's all been discussed. I've laid all these problems out for you. I've like, you're just like a therapist. I've told you all my problems, and these rooks are one of them. They're not in the game. I'm going to open the positions Russian schoolboy style. If he wants me to open, I'm going to open. Dark squared bishop also covered by the strong defensive knight on f3. He can kick the knight here by playing e5, e4. And I do agree that could be problematic for me, but I do have squares. That I can go to. Now we're going to menace this queen. Now things could get a little hairy for him. I could also push here to cement the pawn, but then that creates a hole. I can also just take the pawn. It's funny, you don't think that your opponent's going to just give you away pawns, even though Chess.com said this guy likes to sacrifice pawns. You don't really think about it until you see it on the board. This is not something I saw in my calculations. I was looking at the position purely positionally, not tactically. Of course, if I do move the f3 knight and capture the pawn on e5, then my bishop drops, right? But, okay, now I have check on the c6 square. That's a check. And I'm forking the rook. And I got a knight here too, which is very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Potentially a mating combination with the knight and queen, but this comes off. So let's calculate it. Knight takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. Queen to c6, check. The queen cannot interpose because my knight is covering now the important d7 square. The black king has to move. If he goes here and I take the rook, that's check, but I can't take the rook because the knight. Okay, we've done the calculation. However, comma, queen takes pawn. A correction. Knight takes pawn. Let's start over. Knight takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. I'm down a piece. Queen takes knight. Threatening, very nasty move here. Also, rapid rook infiltration threatened. It's an interesting, somewhat risky maneuver because simply rook on f to d1 is winning in an already winning position. So do I play to the peanut gallery and we do this? Is the queen dangerous down here to me? Not. I could take that, I suppose. But then, you know, this. How is he going to survive this? Okay, so let's go through it again. Okay, practice makes perfect. Repetition is part of learning. Knight takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. Queen takes knight. Threatening f7. How does he cover it? He can't cover it. He can't cover it. Rook here. No, he can't cover it. He can't cover it. It's not coverable. Okay. Alright, let's do it. I think I have enough resources in this position to manage things. And in fact, Pablo chickens out. He chickens out entirely and doesn't take my bishop. It's chicken bok bok for Pablo. Or is it? Perhaps this is a sly move because I have two undefended pieces. If I just bring my knight back from the raid, bring her back to my chest. Now I'm covering my dark spirit bishop. I'm up a pawn. Oh, my queen is here. I don't really mind so much this situation because I get a tempo and I can get connected past pawns. I can also simply capture. I'm up the equivalent of 3 pawns in material. And that virtually guarantees the win. So the question becomes, as it often does to a chess player who thinks he's an artist, which is not me, do I try to win this game beautifully and elegantly, or do I just exchange the queens here and grind the bot down and we move on to the next 1600 bot? What do we do? That's the question that I'm asking right now. Do I retreat the knight, let the queens come off, but now I have connected past pawns potentially, and I can display some chess prowess utilizing those past pawns? What if I bring the rook here and he takes my knight? Okay, we'll just sacrifice it. Now what are you going to do? Again, you've lost contact with this important c6 square, but all this calculation I've done doesn't work with the rook covered. My rook is here though. All right, so look. All right, let's look at this because there is a king in the open. Suppose I put the F rook on the D file. Free knight, right? Pablo takes the knight, queen takes knight. I come here, check. The king has to move. If it moved to the D file, I could win the queen thusly. But he won't move to the D file. For that reason, he'll go here instead. Then I threaten the queen anyway. Let's say she takes the bishop because it's unguarded. And now my queen that was on c6 comes here looking for a mate because it's covered by the rook that would be on d1. But the king runs. And, there's this danger. So I don't think sacrificing this knight is an idea. Don't think it works. We're just going to torture him. And we're going to bring the knight back. I'm not just going to leave it. Oh, I could defend the knight with a bishop here. Now my bishop is slightly overloaded, which could be a tactical issue. Or do I just take the queen and grind him down? I'm using way too much time on this. I don't know if you're still even watching this YouTube video. You're seeing what happens to chess players when they're presented with too many good moves or too many winning ways to win the game. Let's just grind him down. Okay, we're going to play Max Murray style, pound them into dust chess. We're going to pound them into dust. Let's take this open file. The bishop inhibited by its own pawn on c5. Don't know what he wants with that. Don't know what he wants with that at all. I do have some issue trying to mobilize my stuff. Rooks belong on the 7th rank. We're playing quickly now because I think I can just pulverize them. Off come a pair of rooks. That's one step closer to victory for me. I do have some issues with how do I coordinate this. He's going to drive the rook away. Virtually anything works. I don't really want to settle it on a dark square because of this bishop could hunt it down like a shark. Come all the way back. This light square might be my best choice. B3, because then I can swing the rook over to the A file. He has no good way of attacking this weakness yet, although he might get to that weakness at some point. I've got to, my position might not be as strong as I thought. It's winning, of course, but he can coordinate. We're going to go here, defending that pawn should this one fall. I think black is misguided here. I think he should be trying to get at my pawns. This knight can come here with tempo, then here. Now I'm attacking an isolated pawn and the bishop. He'll have to make a choice about what he wants to do. If knight comes here, though, the king can drop across. Then I come here. Now the king could be a little overloaded. There's tactical motif. I got to be careful of this, though. That's important because that's a black rank mate. I can't advance the pawn because technically the knight and the rook, of course, are covering that square. My knight not needed for the defense anymore. I've got to get it into the game, so I'm thinking this. I got to be careful about these back rank mates, but I'm not worried about it yet until this rook finds one of these two open files without me able to interpose it. The king should be coming to the center. That's another simple way to grind him down. He could start to impede my knight, though, so let's get my knight into the game while I can. Bishop also has to do more than just passively defending a pawn. He wants the exchange. Fine. Now I can come here, pinning the rook. I don't think that was in his pinning the bishop. I don't think that was in his best interests. I'm going to come here, pins the bishop, a minor annoyance for him. Then I can play here. Got to get my king into the center. Got to get this bishop doing more than just defending a pawn. So we will go here to the long dark square diagonal and attack that one. Now I could take that one, but then that will offer up him. Let's get the problem with my king coming to the center is if black does manage to get the rook to the 7th rank, that could make my king could still potentially vulnerable. I could play here, past pawns must be pushed, a5 to a6, sort of threatening this. I can play, once I've gone to a5, then I can play here, take the pawn, come back to here after he moves the rook to b8. If he does, I'll probably just take that. This pawn not particularly happy anymore. It was performing the operation of keeping black's knight out of the b4 square. Now it's not doing anything. And it can't help its compatriot. I could try to advance them both. I really don't know of any chess patterns, though, where two double pawns advancing up the A file, supported only by a rook and a bishop, is winning. What if I take this pawn? He takes this pawn. I bring the rook back, probably here to defend that pawn. Now I've weakened his pawns further because now all three of them are isolated in exchange for my advanced pawn. Plus the material has brought me one step closer to victory. So the idea would be bishop takes pawn, rook takes pawn, bring the bishop back to b7. How am I going to get at these pawns though if all my stuff has to kind of guard itself? I have a free check. I want to target this. I want to get my king into the game. He could come here next. I mean, that... Alright. Let's just kind of stop the steamroller. Okay? And then we're going to, again, get everything under control. Oh, yeah. Okay, I agree. I don't disagree with this move. I can't disagree. It's going to be a pawn rip. Then this... Now he's going to take here. Yeah, yep. Say I'm blowing it. This is 1600 baht. You can't really fritter with them. The once this pawn is gone, he can start advancing his own dangerous pawn. Plus, he can come down to the 7th rank. I don't have my king, which is probably what I should have been doing to cover all this. Okay. What do I have here? I'm in trouble, sort of. Not trouble, but the only sort of advantage I have is once the rook comes here, he's off an important... I think I just got to go pawn hunting myself. Got to be very careful about these back rank mates, because he could go here, here, threaten this bishop, and the bishop moves from that square mate. Gonna have to let this pawn go, friends. Just gonna have to let it go. Here, here, check, here. Okay again. He decides to advance it. Bishop here, maybe. His rook is... Where's his rook? Here, right? Then he goes here. And I come behind it. This is going to drop. I think I can drop these pawns in exchange for each other, and I'll have 4-on-2 on this side. I'm not playing this well. There's a Patzer sees check, Patzer makes check, leads to nothing. I don't think there's any advantage at all of my rook being on b2, other than it can come hunting. But I can't do that right now. Can't do that right now. Because I decided, rather foolishly, that I would go ahead and tie all my pieces to the defense of each other. Oh boy. If I move my king away, bang, that's a problem. He's got a much better king than I have. He's got a much better bishop than I have because it has a target, and he's got a better rook. And my compensation for that is 3 pawns, of which I'm about to lose 1. Go here, here, here with the king, or here, or go here and here. I gotta create another pass pawn so that I have 2 threats. Can I guard this pawn? It's not something I've really looked at. I've just assumed it's dead. I could recoil. The rook goes to b3, takes rook here. Maybe he goes back, but now I've got a blockading piece now because there's this. So I might have to play this. Oh boy, it's getting complicated. It's getting complicated. So this plan is not feasible because if it comes down to rook against rook with the dark square bishops traded off, they have a saying that all rook pawns are drawn. In this case, probably not, but it's going to be harder, even harder to win than it already is. If I go here, I'm not challenging any of these pawns. If I go here and make the bathtub, I'm not really creating luft because the dark squared bishop, which was black's worst minor piece, is now very well positioned. If I go here, I restrict that dark squared piece, deny it the E5 square, which isn't a bad idea, but does create a backward pawn and potential target on E3. This might be a move. I don't know. I want to get that one too. So what if I do that? Check. I don't know where he goes here. Here takes. I take. Here. Nothing I can do. I got it because he's going to move the rook here. I got to make a light square hatch. Okay, I think he's making a mistake. Why he didn't take this pawn, I don't know. I think he's blundering. Go here, attacking the bishop and the pawn. He just comes back. Go here. That pawn drops. He tries to drop me. Now he has no. He's not getting a back rank mate. Even if he makes this thing move away, and even if he wins my ace in the hole, my pawn in A3, I am still got a significant material advantage. I wonder why he didn't take this. I don't believe there was any tactical refutation. There's a check here, not of any consequence. My rook is in danger. I could pin the bishop against the king. Would not be awful because the only way to defend that bishop would be to bring the king closer. But we're gonna go ahead after this one. It's probably what he's worried about. Now I can play this. And he's just gonna. Pablo's just. He's lost his mind. I'm gonna hoover up all these pawns. That suction noise you hear is me gobbling up all his pawns like a Hoover vacuum cleaner. He could be trying to put all his eggs in the basket of removing my C4 pawn and queening. Why he hasn't taken this C4 pawn is just beyond me at this point. I can play here, pinning the king. And then I'm setting up a little trap by moving my bishop here next, which I might do, or I could just start running. Notice I'm controlling that square, the queening square. Then he won't have time, and I could even sacrifice a piece to stop it. So there's go for the cheapo. Or go for the glory. Okay, here it comes. He's done a lot of mysterious moves to set this all up. Probably when he moved the bishop back, I probably should have checked him. Force his king away. Or for him to pin his own bishop. Run, Hermie. Now that dastardly trick. Now we see that dastardly trick. I gotta be careful where I put this bishop. Here might be best. Here I don't want to block my rook. Here offering the exchange would be interesting. So let's look at that, because that's he's going to try and run with this still. He can't stop this, you know. And if he did, if he tried to, he could put a rook behind it, and then the second one goes. And my king can come over and take care of this pawn. I go here, he might have to move away. That's not so bad for him. The king's on the end of that diagonal. But then I continue my run for glory. For justice and for glory. So let's say it's time. Okay, I think I can reign this rook pawn endgame. Where do I want this? Here stops him from stopping the pawn entirely. Comes down. I don't know, here. Yeah. Here we go. Now he can't get a rook to the back rank to try and stop that. Doesn't have time. Now he's dead man. He's a dead man walking. Now we're going to finish him. I blew it. Really kind of, that's another game where I wasn't at my best. We're going to have a ring around the posy type situation with this pawn. The rook is here. We want the efficient kill. Here, check might be a good way to start. And if he brings his king out to the A-B file, then he's dropping a rook. So he's got to come back, which is where I want him. And yeah, so let's do that. Okay, he's coming back. I got him exactly where I want him. He's still playing ring around the posy, though. Queen here doesn't work. I'm going to check him this way. I'm going to grab the pawn next. And that's just going to shatter his morale even worse. There's also a check here. Comes here. Here. Comes back here. I think I just checkmate him. We're not even going to bother with this measly pawn. Okay, we're not even going to bother with that. We're just going to checkmate him. It's going to be that simple. Okay? It's going to be that simple. Go back here. He's trying to escape. Is there an elegant way to do this? Check doesn't work because he goes here. Check. I'm running him around a lot. I don't want to do that. Check here doesn't work because he runs out this way. This bastard. Alright. Really have to do it in Neanderthal. That's a spite check. That's another spite check. Looking for a stalemate. I gotta be careful. Oh boy. Oh boy. That Pablo, he is tricky. Chess.com was right. But, look, Pablo, look. Okay? I'm going to torture you. You're going to have to move your pawn. Yeah. Point. Nice try, though, Pablo. Nice try. So that's another 1600 baht down. I don't know about my play. I'm going to have to put it into the chess.com evaluation routine. Take a look at it. I think I lost control of the position, and if Pablo had taken my pro-offered c4 pawn, all right, chess fans, catch you later. Have a nice day. I could do game review now, but I don't think you can see it, so.